The air turned thick, heavy with the smell of money, when Oriana placed a sheet of paper on the table. It was a draft budget for the wedding, something I had never seen in my entire 69 years. A number at the bottom of the page made me narrow my eyes. $900,000. She did not even blink as she slid it toward me. Meanwhile, I sat there confused, unable to grasp what kind of problem had just appeared in front of me. Welcome back to Dad's Real-Life Revenge. This is a very strange story. The groom's family demanding wedding money from the bride's side. Subscribe and leave a comment with the number 8 so we can begin this story together. I was sitting at Coastal Pearl, a restaurant where the sound of waves outside the balcony rolled in softly like the heartbeat of a storm slowly approaching. Across from me sat Oriana Whitfield, the future mother-in-law of my daughter. She looked like she had stepped straight out of a luxury magazine. Her hair was tied in a flawless high bun without a single strand out of place. The diamond ring on her finger was so large, I felt like it could anchor a small boat. But her eyes were different. Cold. Calculating. They were not the eyes of a woman about to become family. They were the eyes of a hunter measuring the weight of its prey. I took a sip of white wine. The sharp bitterness settled on my tongue. Oriana kept talking endlessly about her family lineage in Greenwich, about gala evenings at Yale, about traditional values that people like me, in her words, would never truly understand. My daughter Emma sat beside me. She held tightly to the hand of her fiancé Kane. Kane looked uneasy. He avoided looking at his mother. Instead, he stared down at his plate, as if searching for a way out. I looked at Emma. My daughter had always been a simple child. She never needed any of this. But Oriana did. She needed a stage where she could display her borrowed glamour. You see, in my line of business, you learn to read people by the way they treat the waiters. Oriana snapped at a young server simply because the wine was not cold enough. She used luxury like a weapon to crush the people around her. She glanced at my suit with quiet disdain. Emma lightly touched my leg under the table. At that moment, my phone vibrated once inside my pocket, a short reminder of a message. I looked at my daughter and noticed something different in her eyes. I knew Emma wanted a simple wedding dream with the man she loved. She had always been that kind of person. But the moment that draft appeared on the table, I knew it was a financial black hole waiting to swallow them whole. I smiled. The calm smile of a father who had lived through enough storms to recognize when another one was about to arrive. I looked straight into Oriana's deep blue eyes. Behind the expensive foundation on her face, I saw something chillingly empty. This story is not just about an extravagant wedding. It is about a battle for survival between sincerity and bottomless greed. Everything was only beginning, and I promise you the ending will make it impossible for you to look away from the screen. Oriana took a sip of sparkling water with a kind of aristocratic elegance that felt almost theatrical. She pushed the budget paper toward me. Her fingers carried the heavy scent of perfume and a pride she did not even try to hide. The number $900,000 was still sitting there. Was it a plan for a joyful day or a crushing financial burden for a young couple just starting their lives? The Whitfield family has its own standards, Silas, she began in a low but commanding voice. We come from Greenwich. We studied at Yale. We do not host cheap outdoor parties with barbecue and beer. This wedding represents the face of our family. I stayed silent. I let her talk. In business, the person who talks the most is usually the one who knows the least or the one trying to hide something. I watched Kane. The young man kept his head lowered. He would not look me in the eyes the way he had before. Something was not right. A groom should look happy, not like someone who is afraid of something. Oriana continued digging into the differences in social class. She talked about elite friends who would fly in from London and Paris. She talked about Kane marrying into a lower class. Unbelievable. She used that phrase so casually as if my daughter were some discounted item her son was generously choosing to take home. So according to Whitfield tradition, the bride's family will cover most of the expenses. In other words, if my daughter wanted to match her son, she needed to make up the difference. Oriana tapped her finger lightly on the number $630,000. That was 70% of the total budget. She looked at me as if she were granting a privilege. I know you have a small construction company. I hope you have saved enough for Emma's big day. Do not let the girl embarrass herself in front of our friends. It was the tone of someone hollow inside. Truly wealthy and truly refined people at least understand the most basic manners. To me it felt like an insult. At home my daughter was treated like a treasure. Here she was being spoken of like a discounted product. I saw Emma gripping the edge of the tablecloth so tightly that her fingertips turned pale. That only fueled my anger even more. But it was still too early for me to understand the full picture. I looked again at the ring on Oriana's finger. It glittered under the restaurant lights, but to someone who had worked with all kinds of materials, something about it felt wrong. It was too perfect, too flashy, just like the woman wearing it. A display meant to hide something rotten underneath. She thought I was just a poor father worried about paying the bill. She thought she could scare a man who built his entire career from nothing by flashing the name Greenwich. Kane tried to raise his head, as if he wanted to say something, but one sharp glare from Oriana shut him down immediately. I felt a wave of sadness for him. A man who was supposed to become the pillar of his own family, yet he could not even stand up for himself in this moment. Maybe it all came from the manipulation of his mother. If my guess was right, she was using her own son like a puppet on a stage. She was turning this wedding into a business deal. I took a sip of cold water. The chill ran down my spine. I was about to speak when I felt another vibration from my pocket. Not a single short buzz like before. This time it came 3 times in a row. Another signal from Emma. My daughter looked at me with eyes that were trying to tell me something. Because the previous signal I had not even checked yet, I had been too busy listening to Oriana's endless monologue. I lowered my head and pulled out my phone. A series of messages appeared, all carrying the same words. I read the line over and over again. Dad, he is not the groom. She is the groom. I looked up. Oriana was still talking endlessly about a rare type of orchid that needed to be imported from the Netherlands. She looked flawless. But my daughter's words began echoing in my mind like an alarm bell. She is the groom. What did that mean? Kane was just a pawn. A tool she was using to enter my family. Her real target was not the wedding. It was my wallet. I took a slow, deep breath. The calm of a seasoned businessman returned to me. I glanced at Kane. The young man still kept his head down, his hands tightly clasped together. Now I understood his uneasiness. It was not anxiety about the wedding. It was the guilt of someone participating in a deception against the person he loved. Oriana seemed to notice my unusual silence. She tilted her head, a gesture of artificial concern. Mr. Silas, you seem deep in thought. I understand that $630,000 is not a small number for a construction man. But think about Emma's future. The girl deserves the very best. I smiled. It was the same smile I used during the most intense negotiations. Thank you for sharing the Whitfield family traditions, I said, my voice calm and steady. It has been very enlightening. She did not just want money for a wedding. She wanted control. She wanted to drain the people she considered beneath her. I realized Emma's foot was still touching mine under the table. I placed my hand over hers on the table. I wanted my daughter to know I had received the message, and I would not let anyone hurt her. Oriana raised an eyebrow. So we are agreed then. I need a deposit of $200,000 for the event planner tomorrow morning. They do not hold reservations long for strangers. She was rushing. A classic sign of a con artist when they sense their prey starting to hesitate. They push you into urgency so you do not have time to think. They want you to sign the check before you notice the cracks in their perfect mask. Let me think about it, I replied. I need to review the cash flow from my current projects. $1 million wedding deserves careful preparation, does it not? Oriana's eyes flashed with a hint of irritation. She was not used to being delayed, but she quickly recovered her polite expression. Of course. I will wait for your call tonight. Do not disappoint us. We stood up. Lunch ended with an awkward silence hanging in the air. When we stepped outside the restaurant, the sea breeze felt cold against my skin. I watched Oriana and Kane walk toward the luxury car waiting for them. I knew the battle had only just begun. Emma grabbed my arm as we walked toward the parking lot. Dad, I am sorry, she whispered. I pulled my daughter into a tight embrace. There is nothing to apologize for, Princess. I have seen everything I needed to see. Now I had a new mission. I needed to find out who Oriana Whitfield really was, and why Kane said she was the groom. The answer lay somewhere that her money could not hide. I took out my phone and dialed a number I had not called in years. Why would a mother be willing to use her own son as bait? And what terrible secret was Kane hiding about his family? The discoveries made by Detective Joe Russo would make you shiver at the cruelty of this woman. Oriana's car disappeared behind the line of trees. I stood there tasting the salt of the sea and the bitterness of betrayal. Emma slid into the passenger seat of my car. She was not crying. She simply stared straight ahead into the empty distance. A heavy silence filled the air. I did not start the engine right away. I needed to hear the truth. "Dad, Kane tried to warn me," Emma finally said. Her voice was thin like a fragile thread. "He loves me, but he is her slave. A slave of flesh and blood." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The skin on my hands turned pale. "Tell me about that message," I said firmly. Emma turned toward me. Her eyes were red. "Kane said the Whitfield family is a lie. They have no trust fund. They have no mansion in Greenwich. Everything she wears, the car she drives, all of it is rented with the last dollars taken from her previous victims. She is not looking for a daughter-in-law. She is looking for a sponsor for her decaying luxury lifestyle. Kane has been manipulated since he was a child. She holds secrets about him. She threatens to destroy his life if he does not help her carry out this scheme. He calls her the groom because she is the one who decides every move. Kane is only a shadow." A shock ran down my spine. This was not a wedding. This was an armed robbery, except the weapons were marriage papers and empty promises. Oriana was a con artist. She used the emotions of young people to drain the parents who loved them. My anger slowly gave way to clarity. I remembered Kane's eyes in the restaurant. That silent plea now made sense. He wanted to escape, but Oriana's cage was too strong. He truly loved Emma. And because of that love, he risked everything to send her a warning under the table. I started the engine. The motor roared to life with determination. "We will not let her win," I said. "But we need proof. We need to know how many families this monster has passed through before reaching us." Emma looked at me, worry clear on her face. "What are we going to do, Dad? They are professionals. They have good lawyers. They have perfect fake documents." I gently tapped my daughter's hand. "They may have professionalism, but I have the truth. And I have old friends who never forget a debt." I drove toward the center of the city. In my mind, a plan was already forming. A plan not only to protect Emma, but also to bring justice for the people she had drained before us. Oriana thought she had found a wealthy and gullible builder. She did not know that builders are the people who know exactly how to tear down rotten structures from the foundation. I stopped the car in front of an old building. This was where Joe Russo worked, a former detective with a mind like a computer. If anyone could rip the mask off Oriana Whitfield, it would be him. Before stepping inside, I looked at Emma one last time. "I promise you this wedding will still happen, but not the way she wants it to. It will be a wedding of freedom." I pushed open the heavy wooden door of Joe Russo's office. The familiar smell of old tobacco and worn leather hit my nose. Joe sat behind a desk, buried under piles of files. He did not look up. He simply tapped a pencil against the desk in a steady rhythm. I had known Joe for 20 years back, when he was a detective with a reputation as a bloodhound who never gave up. "Silas," Joe said, his voice rough like sand in his throat, "you never come to see me unless someone is about to face serious trouble." I sat down across from him and placed Oriana's budget sheet on the desk. "I need you to look into this woman, Oriana Whitfield." Joe picked up the paper, glanced at the number $900,000, and smirked. "An expensive price for a wedding, but a cheap price to buy your freedom if you find out early enough." He turned to an old computer and began typing rapidly. The room fell silent, except for the steady spin of the ceiling fan and the pounding of my heart in my chest. I watched Joe's face closely. The wrinkles on his forehead tightened. His eyes narrowed behind thick glasses. A few minutes passed before a dry beep sounded. Joe rotated the screen toward me. "Take a look, Silas. Whitfield is not her real name." An old identification photo appeared on the screen. The same face, but younger and sharper. Oriana Marie Lorella. That was her real name. Joe began reading through the information. "She is not from Greenwich. She was born into a poor family on the outskirts of Ohio. No Yale. No aristocratic tradition. Just a long list of civil lawsuits and restraining orders. She is a performer," Joe said. "Her specialty is marriage fraud. She targets wealthy fathers, men who love their daughters so much that they become blind. She uses her son as bait to gain access. Once the wedding deposits are transferred into shell accounts, she and the boy disappear without a trace." I felt my blood begin to boil. The humiliation at Coastal Pearl suddenly had its answer. She dared to use Emma's love as part of a filthy scam. She dared to mock my work, while she herself did not have a single honest dollar to her name. But there is something strange here, Joe suddenly said. He pointed at a red line on the screen. In the two most recent cases, her son Kane tried to contact the police. But she always escaped because of strict confidentiality agreements. She holds something over Kane. Something powerful enough to keep him obedient even while he hates her for it. Now I understood the desperation in Kane's eyes. He was not an accomplice. He was another prisoner trapped inside his mother's scheme. Joe pulled out a yellow folder from the bottom drawer. This is the case from Charlotte 3 years ago. A construction contractor family lost $2 million. The father collapsed and died of a stroke shortly after the scam was revealed. Oriana does not just steal money. She takes lives and destroys reputations. My hand tightened into a fist. I was not the contractor from Charlotte. I was Silas. And I was not going to let this story end the way she wanted. Joe looked at me, a sharp light flashing in his eyes. So, what is your plan? I stared at Oriana's photograph on the screen. A plan was forming. One that required the same level of ruthlessness she had shown my family. We will let her believe she is winning, I said quietly. We will let her reach for that $1 million. But that moment will be the end of Oriana Marie Lorella's career. Joe nodded. A rare smile appeared on his weathered face. I like the way you think, Silas. Let me contact a few old friends at the FBI. We will need more than just these old files. When I stepped out of Joe's office, darkness had already covered the city. Streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk. I knew Oriana was probably sitting in her rented luxury apartment, sipping wine and dreaming about my money. What she did not know was that Detective Joe Russo had just opened a Pandora's box she would never want to see. But there was one detail Joe had discovered in those files that made me stop beside my car. There was a victim whose name never appeared in the official records. Someone who vanished after confronting Oriana. Who was that person? And why did Kane look terrified whenever he mentioned that name to Emma? The truth behind Oriana's crimes was deeper than we had imagined. Joe Russo flipped another page in the file. The soft rustle of paper in the quiet office sounded like fingernails scraping across wood. He slid another photograph toward me. This time it was not an identification photo. It was a candid shot taken inside a courthouse in Atlanta. Oriana stood there smiling. A victorious smile beside an older man who looked completely shattered. Look closely, Silas, Joe said. This is her script. Charlotte, Atlanta, Naples. Every city is a different name. Every family is left in ruins. She never uses a gun. She uses marriage licenses. She convinces the victims to sign the checks willingly because they want to save face. They would rather lose the money than let the world know they were fools who got played. I stared at the list of victims. Construction families, self-made business owners. All of them looked like me. People who worked hard and loved their daughters too much. Oriana was not just a thief. She was a parasite. She drained financial resources and left behind emotional corpses. A chill crawled down my spine when I reached the notes about the case in Naples. One father took his own life after discovering the entire payroll fund of his company had been drained under the pretense of a wedding deposit in Italy. Oriana disappeared immediately afterward with $800,000 in cash. Not a trace. Not a goodbye. The cruelty went far beyond anything I had imagined. To her, destroying a human life was nothing more than another number on a balance sheet. I thought about Emma. If we had not realized the truth in time, my daughter would have been the next victim. She would have carried the pain of betrayal from the man she planned to marry. But what about Kane? I asked, my eyes still fixed on the file. Why does he stay with her? Joe sighed, as a thin ribbon of smoke drifted into the air. That is the darkest part. Oriana is not just his mother. She is the keeper of his secret. There was an accident 10 years ago. A hit and run. Oriana stepped forward and took the blame for Kane, but in reality she used it to put a permanent noose around his neck. Every time Kane tries to leave, she threatens to reopen the case. She turned a mother's protection into a lifelong slave contract. That is why Kane sent that message. He is trying to save Emma. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. Neon lights flickered like watchful eyes in the darkness. I did not just feel anger. I felt a cold determination forming inside me. Oriana Whitfield, or Oriana Marie Lorella. This time she had chosen the wrong man to target. She thought I was an aging contractor who could be fooled by fancy words and high society names. She did not know that I had built the strongest foundations out of rubble. And I also knew how to bring down a rotten structure from the inside. Joe, I said, without turning around, I need a list of every surviving victim. We are not fighting this alone. We are bringing all her ghosts back at once. Joe nodded and reached for the phone. I knew the game had changed. Oriana was probably already planning the next dinner where she would demand the money transfer. She had no idea that dinner would be the last one she enjoyed in freedom. But just as I was about to leave, Joe called out, "Silas, there is one more thing. I just found the name of the victim who disappeared in Naples. You are not going to believe it. That person had a connection to Cain closer than anyone else. A truth that could completely change the way we see that young man. Was Cain truly an accomplice? Or was he the final card that could turn the entire game around?" I arranged to meet Cain in an empty parking lot near the harbor. The sea wind blew hard. The sound of metal chains striking the masts echoed like the shackles of a ghost ship. Cain stepped out from the shadows. He wore a black coat, the collar pulled high to hide his pale face. When he saw me, he froze. His eyes held fear mixed with a strange sense of relief. "I knew you would call, Cain," said his voice trembling. "Did you read Emma's message?" I walked closer and looked straight into his eyes. The eyes of someone trapped with no escape. "I read it," I replied. "And I also read the file about your mother. Or should I say Oriana Lorella?" Cain stepped back and leaned against the hood of a car. His whole body seemed to collapse like a house without a foundation. "I am sorry, Silas. I truly love Emma. But she is a devil. She never lets me escape. She uses that accident from years ago to force me to perform this act with her again and again." I placed my hand on his shoulder. The steady weight of a builder's hand helped him stand upright again. "Listen to me, Cain. You have two choices. One is to remain her puppet and watch Emma's life get destroyed. The other is to help me end this nightmare. You will not go to prison for the things she forced you to do. I have Joe Russo. I have evidence she does not know exists." I pulled a tiny recording device from my pocket. It was thin enough to hide beneath a shirt collar. "I need you to wear this," I said. "I need you to make her admit the $200,000 deposit. I need her to talk about the families in Charlotte and Naples." Cain stared at the recorder as if it were a ticking bomb. "If she finds it, she will kill me," he whispered. I looked directly into his eyes. "If you do nothing, you will kill yourself slowly every day when you look at Emma. Choose." Cain stayed silent for a long moment. Waves crashed loudly against the rocks. Then he took the device from my hand. His hands were no longer shaking. "I will do it," he said firmly. "I want to be free. I want to deserve Emma." If you have been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it would really help if you hit the like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it is what keeps this entire channel alive. I helped Cain hide the device inside his shirt. I showed him how to press the hidden activation button. "We only have one chance," I warned him. "Tomorrow night at the family dinner, when she asks me to sign the check, that is when you act. Use her own arrogance to lead her into the trap." Cain nodded. Then he turned and disappeared into the darkness. I stood there alone, feeling the restless pulse of the plan beginning to move. This was a gamble. If Cain betrayed me, I would lose everything. But I chose to believe the 6 words Emma had sent. I chose to believe that love could be stronger than the manipulation of a con artist. I returned to my car. My phone lit up with a message from Oriana. An address for a luxury restaurant tomorrow night. A sweet note about the bright future of our 2 families. She was still dreaming about the $1 million. She did not know the noose was slowly tightening around her own neck. But just as I was about to drive away, another black car slowly rolled out from the dark corner of the parking lot. It had been there the whole time. Had someone been watching our meeting? And if Oriana already knew about our plan, would Cain even survive long enough to walk into that dinner tomorrow night? The luxury restaurant was strangely quiet. Candlelight flickered across the polished silverware on the table. Oriana sat there in a deep red velvet dress. She looked like a queen waiting to receive tribute. Cain sat beside her. He wore the shirt where I had hidden the recorder. His face was stiff. I saw a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. "Silas, you look tired," Oriana said sweetly. She raised her glass of wine. "Perhaps preparing $1,050,000 has been exhausting for you. Do not worry. Once we become family, it will all be worth it." I looked straight into her eyes. I took out my checkbook and placed it on the table. "I prepared the first $200,000 as you requested. But I do have a few questions about the wedding insurance fund you mentioned." Why is the beneficiary account registered to a company in Naples? Oriana froze for a fraction of a second. Then she laughed. A professional laugh. Oh, that is simply a legal structure for tax purposes. In Greenwich we always optimize our financial flows. You would not want your money wasted on the government, would you? She pulled out a stack of invoices. All of them were fake bills from non-existent vendors. She enthusiastically described enormous costs for flowers, musicians, and private security teams. She had no idea that every word she spoke was being transmitted directly to Joe Russo and the investigators sitting inside a van in the parking lot. Suddenly, Kane spoke. His voice trembled slightly, but it was clear. Mom, do we really need that much cash? Emma's father has already been generous. Why not transfer the money directly to the contractors? Oriana's eyes instantly turned cold. She looked at her son, as if he were a traitor. Darling, you should focus on being a good groom. Leave financial matters to the adults. Then she turned back to me, trying to recover her calm expression. You see, young people sometimes fail to understand the value of discretion. I slid the check toward her. I had signed it, but I had not written the amount yet. I would like to hear again about Charlotte. You said your family has strong connections there. Will any of those friends attend the wedding? The name Charlotte made Oriana stiffen. The wine glass in her hand trembled, red liquid spilling over the rim. Why would you mention that place? She asked, her voice dropping into a threat. I smiled. The smile of a builder who had just discovered the fatal crack in a wall. Because I recently met an old friend of yours from there. He said you owe him an apology. And about $2 million. The atmosphere in the room collapsed instantly. Oriana's aristocratic mask vanished. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing like a trapped animal. Who do you think you are? You are nothing but a lowly builder. You have no right to question me. She snatched the check from the table. But at that exact moment, Kane stood up. He reached inside his collar and ripped the recording device free, dropping it directly onto Oriana's plate. It is over, Mom, Kane said. His voice now carried relief and strength. The FBI has heard everything. Oriana's face turned from red to ghostly pale. She stared at the tiny device, blinking with a red light. Then she looked around the room. The waiters who had been standing quietly suddenly moved closer. They were not waiters. They were undercover agents. Oriana jumped to her feet and rushed toward the back exit. But she stopped abruptly when someone stepped in from the bright doorway. It was not a police officer. It was a middle-aged man with a long scar across his forehead. The missing victim from Naples that Joe Russo had mentioned. The moment Oriana saw him, she let out a horrified cry, as if she had seen a ghost. They believed gray hair meant we had forgotten how to fight. But the truth did not end with an arrest. Another explosive secret about the real connection between this man, Oriana, and Kane was about to be revealed right there in the middle of the room. The man who stepped out of the shadows was Arthur. The victim everyone thought had disappeared in Naples. Oriana stepped backward. The color drained from her face. The expensive foundation on her skin could not hide the terror twisting through every muscle. She stumbled over a chair and collapsed onto the floor. Agents closed in. The metallic sound of handcuffs snapped through the room. Click. It is over, Oriana, I said. My voice was cold as steel. Did you really think you could bury everything under silk and luxury? Oriana showed no remorse. She glared at Kane with burning hatred. Traitor. I gave birth to you. I pulled you out of the mud. She screamed as the agents dragged her past the elegant dining tables. But Kane did not look back. He stood beside Emma. Their hands were tightly intertwined. For the first time in years, I saw his shoulders relax. The weight of slavery had finally been lifted. The trial lasted 11 months. It was a journey through darkness. Joe Russo worked without rest. He brought a long line of victims into the courtroom. Fathers with white hair. Families ruined by bankruptcy. Mothers who had lost their children to the cruelty of this woman. Oriana sat there in an orange prison uniform. No diamond anchor ring. No elegant speeches about Yale or Greenwich. She still tried to perform. She blamed circumstances. She blamed Kane. She claimed she was only a victim of a money-obsessed society. But numbers do not lie. The recordings from Kane's microphone exposed everything. Every fake invoice. Every plan to drain money from another family. Everything stood in the open like daylight. The final verdict left the courtroom silent. Oriana received 15 years in prison with no parole. Roger, the accomplice behind the shell accounts, received 12 years. When the judge struck the gavel, I saw a single tear slide down Kane's cheek. It was not pity, it was the relief of a soul finally escaping hell. It seemed like everything had finally ended. Justice had been served. The criminals had paid the price. But when we stepped outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters and former victims embracing each other in tears, Arthur approached me. He handed me an old piece of paper that had been found in Oriana's archive. He looked at Kane, then back at me with a complicated expression. "Silas, you should read this," Arthur whispered. "This is why she kept Kane under control all these years. It is not only about the accident from years ago." I unfolded the paper. Crooked handwriting from more than 20 years ago appeared on the page. My breath caught in my throat. It was a secret about blood, a truth Kane himself had never known. A revelation that could completely redefine the meaning of family we had fought so hard to protect. Sometimes the greatest victory is not putting a criminal behind bars. Sometimes it is facing the truth about the people we love most. But would Emma and Kane still be able to move forward once this terrible truth came to light? I stood beneath the old oak tree in my yard. The evening breeze moved gently through the leaves. There were no elegant wine glasses clinking together. No unfamiliar guests from Paris or London. Only the laughter of a few close friends, and the smell of freshly cut grass. Emma stepped out wearing a simple white dress. It did not cost thousands of dollars, yet it shined brighter than anything Oriana had ever worn. The paper Arthur gave me still rested quietly in my jacket pocket. The secret about Kane being the real son of one of Oriana's first victims had finally been revealed. She had not only stolen his future, she had stolen his identity when he was still a child and raised him as a tool for her scams. I looked at Kane. He stood waiting for Emma beside the wooden arch I had built with my own hands. He knew the truth now, and he had chosen to face it. Their wedding happened quickly. The entire ceremony cost $520 for the paperwork and a few bundles of wildflowers. When the pastor pronounced them, husband and wife, Kane turned toward me. His eyes were wet. "Thank you, Dad," he said softly. He no longer called me Mr. Silas. He called me Pop. One simple word, but it carried the weight of 1,000. It was recognition. It was the beginning of a real family. I looked toward the horizon. The dark clouds from the trial had finally passed. Oriana sat behind prison bars. She still showed no remorse. In the letters she sent from prison, she continued blaming her son. She called it betrayal. I called it awakening. A con artist will never understand that love cannot be measured by the numbers written on a wedding budget. When the celebration began, I sat alone in an old armchair. I reflected on everything that had happened. We are often blinded by glamour. We fear being seen as lower class. That fear is the fertile ground where people like Oriana plant their seeds. But I learned something valuable. When someone reveals their true character at the dinner table, believe them the first time. Do not paint over their cruelty with excuses. I lifted a glass of lemonade. The sour and sweet were perfectly balanced. Emma and Kane danced together on the grass. They did not have $1 million in their account, but they had each other. They had the truth, and they had a father willing to fight to the very end to protect that truth. I looked toward the imaginary camera in front of me. There was something I wanted to tell you. Life does not always deliver dramatic reversals like the movies. But if you keep your feet firmly on the ground, you will never be swept away by artificial tides. If you followed the story all the way to this moment, you probably felt something for it. So please take one small second to help us. Subscribe. Many people watch without doing it, but it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. The story of the fake Whitfield family has come to an end, but the lessons about trust and awareness will remain. My name is Silas, and this is how I reclaimed my daughter's life. But have you ever wondered how many other Orianas might still be sitting across from you at a Sunday lunch table? The next secret I will reveal about another family of scammers is even more chilling. Are you ready for the next plan? Wait for the story next week.